Now, before starting, I want to recite an acknowledgement of the historic Australian nation that we at the British Australian community have put together, and we recite it before meetings. It goes like this. We acknowledge the Anglo explorers, pioneers, and their descendants who planted the British flag and Western civilization on this continent, creating the Australian nation. We acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who have lived here since the Dreamtime. And we acknowledge the Federal Commonwealth of Australia, created by the nation, under the Crown, to guard the nation and the liberty of all citizens. Now, something like that, I think, should be recited in schools, not this disgraceful acknowledgement of country. Now, today I shall discuss the importance of Australia, of our constitutional monarchy. So I want to talk about two things, the monarchy and the Australian nation, the relationship between them, the mutually supportive relationship, as it should be. And especially, I want to talk about the importance of the monarchy for the founding Anglo-Celtic population. Conversely, I shall discuss how support for the monarchy is being affected by replacement-level immigration. My thesis can be summarised in three short propositions. Firstly, that constitutional monarchy is a precious heritage, a political and cultural institution that needs to be defended against those who would abolish or subvert it. Second thesis is that the monarchy's heritage value consists partly of its effect of psychologically connecting the nation to its roots and thereby connecting us one to the other. It plays a very important role. And the third thesis is that for this reason, demography is a key line of defence if we want to defend the monarchy. The monarchy is most secure among British descended peoples and those assimilated to that culture. Now, before enlarging on these 3 points, I should comment on the meaning of heritage, because this word is bandied around a lot by conservative politicians and conservative commentators. Many treatments of heritage assume that culture and institutions are passed on abstractly in the form of ideas and texts. The sort of heritage are institutions and ideas. That is possible, but infrequent. Today, I'll do the opposite, and I'll be treating flesh and blood human beings as the main heritage passed on to Australia by Britain. As the Australian nation is the main heritage of Britain in these shores. Now, I also want to talk about the context of this discussion. We're talking about how the heritage, British heritage, is manifested in Australia. Why are we talking about it? Are there any really pressing issues right now? And there are. The situation in which the monarchy should be evaluated is the accelerating destruction of Western nations by alienated elites. What David Goodhart calls anywheres who look down on provincial somewheres. It's a good book by David Goodhart in London. Over the last several decades, the political classes of many Western societies have turned against the traditional ethnic hierarchies of Western nations, as the late Anthony Smith described in his classic book, The Ethnic Origin of Nations. Nations such as France and Britain and Germany and the United States formed around a leading ethnicity which provided core features of national identity, such as language spoken, religion, race, and political process. What Eric Kaufmann, another London-based political scientist has argued. What Eric Kaufmann has described as the cosmopolitan assault on Western nations was openly celebrated, admitted, by radicals such as the New York intellectuals in the 1960s. That revolution is now acknowledged by many leading conservative thinkers, such as in America Victor Davis Hanson, in Britain the late Sir Roger Scruton and Mark Sidwell, and the historian David Starkey. And in Australia, the idea has been, or the conclusion has been mentioned by John Anderson, the once leader of the National Party. Most public institutions have gone woke, to use the modern parlance, meaning liberal cosmopolitan, with the partial exception of the British monarchy, whose behaviour is substantially regulated by the unwritten constitution. Kaufmann attributes the radicalism of American institutions to the capture of the university by cosmopolitans by the 1950s. I emphasise that, by the 1950s. We think of radicals, well, the counterculture of the 1960s and 70s, and this recent wokeism. It goes back further. Elite American universities were essentially captured by left cosmopolitans by the 1950s. A leading goal of the globalists is to dissolve Western nations. We are the subject of their cold interests and fiery hatreds, which motivate replacement migration, facilitated by breaking or bypassing the democratic power of the founding nation. That is why the Australian people, or the British, American, French, etc., have never been asked whether they wish to be replaced as the majority ethnic group in their own countries. It doesn't happen. This is an anti-democratic, top-down revolution that's taking place. Demography is destiny. The top-down revolution that began in the 1960s has given top priority to swamping the West's ethnic base. In the United States, whites will be in an absolute minority soon after 2040. That's less than one generation time. White children are already in a minority. Britain, at the present rate, will be minority white British by 2066, it's estimated. That's less than 2 generations' time. In Australia, the situation is similar, though we do not know for sure because the Bureau of Census does not keep relevant statistics, conveniently. Canada is also in bad shape. For many years, their leaders have made Australians look loyal and responsible. We are in the middle phase of this revolution. Though in marked retreat, the political structure and demographics are still recoverable. So I think it's still possible to maintain an optimistic outlook, a can-do outlook on this. Now the preceding is the context in which our monarchical system must be evaluated. We're engaged in an existential fight, not of our choosing, but it's upon us. So our leadership has to be evaluated in the context of that existential fight. The questions are, can the monarchy help protect us from elites which are seeking to diversify Anglo-Celtic societies and to establish ethnic hierarchies with minorities at the top? That's the reality of multiculturalism. Multiculturalism is an ethnic hierarchy with us at the bottom and minorities at the top. This is a crisis from which our way of life and high-trust society might not emerge intact. Now allow me to lay out the 3 points, my original points, where I summarise my thesis. First thesis, to recall. Constitutional monarchy is a valuable political and cultural institution that warrants being defended against those who would abolish or subvert it. Firstly, constitutional monarchy brings significant political benefits. It helps ward off revolutions, for example. The most destructive wars and genocides of the 20th century occurred in Russia and Germany shortly after they had abandoned their ancient monarchies. The French Revolution in the late 18th century is another example. Through constitutionally mandated symbolism and procedure, our monarchy provides a separate centre of soft power, a potential counterweight to rogue elites. At the same time, our monarch stays above politics. It is generally acknowledged that the British colonisers had a large technological advantage over Indigenous people. That's why a small island on the other side of the world could colonise a continent, because it was so technologically advanced. It is less often realised that the advantage extended to government, in effect to what can be called political technologies. Monarchy is a common solution to the problem of how to transition between leaders with minimum chaos. Most societies throughout history have been afflicted by this problem. When the king or the queen dies, there's chaos, people competing for that position. So transitioning between regimes is an age-old problem that monarchies largely do take care of. It is no coincidence that the people that invented the Industrial Revolution were also among the earliest to adopt parliamentary democracy and, more fundamentally, constitutional rule, constitutional monarchy. Both technologies, the industrial and the political, were adaptive. Both produce group flourishing. So that's one rich source of British heritage that we have in Australia. Identity is just as important as politics. So I've discussed some of the tremendous benefits, political benefits of monarchy. Identity is another. When evaluating our monarchy, we need to consider identity. The institution, including the royal family, bears identity markers which signify particular ethnicity and civilization, the latter consisting largely of Christian symbols and rituals. This is why the monarchy bolsters social cohesion, which underpins all the benefits that accrue from our high trust society. These markers also attract the ire of those who dislike Britain or Christianity. The institution of monarchy connects us to our deep history, fundamental fact about identity. People, especially young people, live in the here and now. They live in the internet. Their attention span is microscopic. But in principle, the monarchy is capable, potentially at least, of transporting them back. These were your ancestors. These are the origins of our tradition and our civilization. The monarchy represents a heritable tradition that developed institutionally over 1,000 years. This is, for us, deep history. The monarchy also contributes to millions knowing who they are, a fundamental human question. Who am I? If we lose our monarchy, our sense of self in history will be diminished. The second thesis I want to advance is that the monarchy's heritage value consists partly of it psychologically connecting the nation to its roots and thereby connecting members of the nation to one another. It connects Anglo-Celtic Australians to our past because the monarchy bears ethnic and civilisational markers of history and descent. The institution is a window, a portal into the deep past that renews the shared memories that are so important for national solidarity. That is less true when a monarchy becomes imperial, by the way, when a country is so successful that it conquers other countries and sets up an empire. A residue of that still exists with the present Commonwealth, with around 20 member countries. It is also relevant that ethnic diversity undermines trust and social cohesion. This is a central finding of relevance to multiculturalism. What is the main mantra of multiculturalism? Diversity is our, what is it? Strength. The absolute opposite is the fact. There have been around 80 empirical studies of the social effects of diversity, and meta-analysis show that all of them find negativity. This finding has been replicated many times by social science research. The disruptive effect of diversity was first posited by the English philosopher John Stuart Mill in the mid-19th century. He wrote a paper called On Nationality. Mill was the father of classical liberalism. He also argued that individuals should be free to live among their own nationality. And by the way, he played an indirect role in the establishment of the Australian Federation, because Sir Henry Parkes, the father of Federation, was a follower of John Stuart Mill and took his inspiration from him. Perhaps the most invidious form of diversity is ethnic stratification, where one ethnic group is wealthier or more prestigious than another, which is more prestigious than another. Ethnic stratification. And this is found throughout the Anglosphere. This feeds radical politics. Indeed, multiculturalism is typically pitched against the founding ethnicity. The saga of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex shows how destructive the combination of diversity and radicalism can be. The argument has been advanced during the last years. The argument has been advanced that the royal family should become multiracial to better reflect the diversity of Britain and Australia. This is actually a tacit admission that at present minorities are less supportive of the monarchy. Why would they make such an argument if there was no problem to solve? The potential for the monarchy to become a radical political vehicle has been evident for some time. Already, liberal cosmopolitanism, wokeism, has made inroads, for example, with the King having a history, when he was Prince of Wales, I should emphasise, of making fashionable leftist statements concerning the environment and doubting the monarchy's special relationship to the Christian faith. There were also jarring symbolic compromises made in Prince Harry's wedding to Meghan Markle in 2018. As luck would have it, the royal family is set to remain Anglo-Christian for at least another generation. Harry and Meghan, the most likely sources of a diverse royal family, have marginalised themselves. And in any case, their children are a fair way down the line of succession. So that I don't see that as anything more than a symbolic issue. By the same token, imagine that William had married Meghan Markle. Just hold that thought for a moment. We would be stuck with the results for a long time. Ethnic alienation of the symbolic head of state would be set to do its damage for at least a generation. The ghost of Martin Luther King would have walked the halls of Buckingham Palace, a situation that would probably have reduced the popularity of the monarchy among those who most normally support it. In that case, the worst harm would be done by changes to the monarchy's cultural identity, with pro-diversity and black liberation ideology becoming parts of the new royal narrative. Thank heavens that didn't happen. Now, I think there's fairness in the idea that the royal family should have a special, reciprocal and affectionate relationship with their original and still majority subjects. After all, through the medieval period of 1,000 years, kings received material, civic, and military service from their subjects. During the long period, monarchs came to accept the Christian mandate to rule in exchange for noblesse oblige, primarily in defending the kingdom and maintaining domestic peace. Now that monarchy serves symbolic, ritualistic functions, it still owes a historical debt, it seems to me, to the indigenous population, of the British Isles. That historical connection does not exist with recent arrivals, though they possess full individual rights. Put differently, the British king is part of the Anglo-Celtic nation with which he shares a long history, ethnic and religious identity, and direct and indirect blood ties. Accordingly, part of the monarch's sacred duty should be to defend the nation's religious, cultural, and demographic interests through symbolic and ritualistic means. Who knows? Perhaps the occasional monarch will even feel genuine attachment to his or her ancient nation and feel their growing dispossession. Wouldn't that be nice? Perhaps some kings and queens will refuse to chant the ridiculous mantras about the joys of diversity and instead evince a common destiny with their people. It would be preferable if such changes were mandated by constitutional amendments, of course, because the monarch in our tradition is bound to follow the unwritten constitution. Perhaps Drew Fraser, who's here today, by the way, with us, perhaps Drew Fraser is right, and a warrior king will emerge. And again, who knows, perhaps such devotion, akin to that of a parent, will be necessary to bind the nation to the monarchy anew and thus preserve the institution down the generations. Now, my third and final principle that I want to advance is that due to the costs of diversity, demography will be a key area of defence of the monarchy and of the nation. The monarchy is most secure. This is worth really repeating. The monarchy is most secure among British peoples and those assimilated to British culture and traditions. The crowds that queued to view the late Queen's coffin overwhelmingly consisted of Indigenous British people. But the BBC managed to find one black family, by the way, who got headline coverage on BBC News that night. But it was, in fact, not common. Polling data confirm this impression. In Britain in 2022, a May poll found that only 38% of non-white citizens, this is in Britain, wanted the country to remain a monarchy, 38%, compared to 68% of all Britons surveyed. And if that 68% was of all Britons, then white Britain would have been more towards 80%. This was confirmed by a 2023 YouGov poll, which found that, again, 38% of ethnic minority Britons wanted to keep the monarchy, while 62% of all Britons did. In Australia, New Zealand and Canada, those who are troubled by rising ethnic diversity tend also to support the monarchy as a symbol of their British heritage. In other words, those triggered by growing ethnic, cultural and linguistic diversity in their country are therefore more likely to support the crown as a symbol of their Britishness. Conversely, in Australia and Canada, individuals who have pro-immigration attitudes, who want more immigration, are generally less supportive of the monarchy. So these sources of evidence all converge, or all converging. A final one. After Meghan Markle and Prince Harry criticised the royal family, racist, you see, just racist, support for the couple declined in Britain. However, in 2022, support was high among black British, according to a YouGov poll. They were thinking with their identity. Their sympathies lay with their own identity. All this is suggestive, not conclusive evidence that the British monarchy will be supported more by ethnic Brits than by immigrant communities. It follows that the fight to retain our monarchy should include defence of Anglo-Celtic Australia from replacement level immigration. Now, democracy is relevant here. Democracy leads generally to nationalism. What is the connection? Because all people want self-rule, and so they vote for that. They feel about that. It is to be expected that monarchies are most benevolent when they are of the people. Therefore, to keep the present royal family, Anglo-Celt should remain a supermajority, not a 51% majority, a 90% majority in Australia, the UK, New Zealand and Canada. For this reason, the British Australian community supports constitutional monarchy not only as an effective form of government, which is clear, but also as symbolic of self-rule, of national autonomy. So I've come to my conclusion. A couple of points more. For many Anglos, the royal family is part of their identity. It is a repository of historical memories and a key legitimiser of the state, in our case the Commonwealth. The problem we need to be considering is, what can we do to protect our monarchy? Whatever strategies we devise, they will involve organising, getting organised. Preserving Anglo-Celtic Australia under the Crown will require lobbying and educational organisations so powerful that governments must work hard and take electoral risks if they want to ignore us. They should be afraid of us, basically. That's what the most successful lobby organisations do. They induce fear in those who oppose them. We need an ecosystem of organisations able to win the hearts and minds of politicians, corporate executives, academics and ordinary citizens. These bodies will have different focuses, including the complementary functions of defending the Crown as a symbol of the traditional nation. Thanks so much for your attention.